Hello, everyone. Spiker here with another episode with one of our coaches. His name is Bill Emerick, and he's from the Pittsburgh territory. I met Bill back when I went to go travel and see our territory director up in Pittsburgh, Tim Jones. If you'd like to see the episode with Tim, just go back into the previous episodes and you'll find it. But I was very fascinated with how Bill approached the training sessions, how he was approaching practice, and what he was teaching his players. And he just wasn't teaching skills. He was teaching life skills. And he did it in a way that was very refreshing. It was a one-to-one. It wasn't him talking down to them. And it wasn't like he was the mighty old whole person that had all this wisdom. He spoke in a way that was more one-to-one and at the same ground as the player. He met them halfway, and players ended up getting themselves to that halfway point, to the 50-yard line, if you per se. And they were accomplishing a lot of big things in just a short amount of time. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to grab him and being able to ask him specific questions that I had personally and how I could get better at when I train my players. So what ended up coming out of this is that I realized that he has a background in education, and he's a director of education for his company. So he thinks about this problem of getting players better in a different perspective than most. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Bill Emerick of Pittsburgh Tigers.
This is a Rawlings Tigers podcast episode.
So I don't know if Tim filled you in on the goal of the conversation and what we're trying to do here.
No, not really.
The goal. So I had this idea probably about a month ago, and I was like, you know what? The goal. I have a lot of great conversations with coaches, and a lot of our directors have a lot of smart ideas, but I feel like coaches sometimes, just because of baseball culture, they don't share ideas as frequently because they're not asked about their thoughts on strategies and culture and all of that, because just because of what baseball culture is, it's very humbling. So you don't want to go too far out on the deep end and you end up getting burned by saying something or anything like that. So, and I also think that coaches are a bit prideful at times, so they don't share as many ideas and have a think tank, basically. And so what I want to do with the Tiger podcast channels is bringing those ideas to the forefront and trying to get coaches that people recommend inside the organization or someone that I know. And obviously we had that interaction at the clubhouse, and I personally, I thought you did an unbelievable job in just that training session that I saw. Like, you were just totally interacting with kids the right way and handling it in a very professional manner. So like that's kind of where my thought process is on this conversation. And I guess because we can start now, is like, how do you approach coaching and how do you approach teaching? Because those are two totally different things at times, and they can also be totally the same things at times too. So like, what's your approach?
Being open-minded and meeting the kids where they're at. Because when kids come in to practice, they're all at different ability levels. They're all in a different mental framework. You don't know what they did at school that day. You don't know what's going on all the time in their personal lives. So meeting them where I can help them. And if that's just working through a small drill that day where they are just working on top hand or a bottom hand, just something simple that would be overlooked so many other times, but that's where they need met that day. Or maybe they're in a great frame of mind and it's working opposite way, letting the ball travel and getting to that uncomfortable position that most kids don't like being in. Feeling like they're getting beat by a ball until they drive it the other way. So depending on where they're at mentally, you have to meet them there. And then at ability level, getting them comfortable to challenge them is a whole nother aspect of what we're trying to do. So I feel like that's where you try to coach. You're coaching more there and you're challenging them and getting them comfortable. Whereas when you're actually teaching, it's you're meeting them where they're at that day. And meshing it is just a whole different world. And doing both in the same practice. And I think that's just, you really take that team gauge where everybody's at. And there's some days where it's more teaching, more getting them their confidence up. And then there's those days where you're ready to challenge and you feel like the team's at that level to go at them and coach and get them moving forward and progressing. So there's always those days that like I feel like maybe it's okay to take a step back because your team's just not there yet, or they just need that mental break. But then there's those days where like, yeah, let's go, we're ready to go, and we challenge them and we grow, and you're coaching more than you are teaching.
How did you develop your framework from coaching? Is it just from coaches in the past, or did you kind of just take it over time with having different groups over the years?
So it's a little bit of both. I was fortunate to have a lot of good baseball coaches. I was also fortunate in learning that I had some bad baseball coaches here or there that you learned, I wouldn't say bad, but challenging to work with. So like I've learned from different sports to take and kind of put together. Brett Butler at Bradford was a phenomenal head coach, and I learned a lot from him, and he was very old-fashioned, but also cared to the point where he would meet you where you at that day. So if there was a hitting session and he could tell you just weren't all there, we would pull back the reins and really focus on that. Maybe personal, maybe it was just like something was tweaked and you weren't going to say it because you didn't want to be out of the lineup that week or anything like that. So he cared about the player. And then I also bring some of that just from my professional work in education, to where I work with a lot of students that have mental disabilities and emotional disturbances. So meeting those kids where they're at every day is part of the job, because you never know what they're coming in with. So I think I've been lucky enough that all of that has kind of formed into a melting pot of what my philosophy looks like and what I choose to use with my kids now, and help prepare that life beyond baseball, life within baseball is ever changing, and that no day is going to be the same, and that no day is going to make perfect sense, because something may go great in baseball life but may not be great in your personal life. And you have to learn how to balance those and realize that it's important to balance those and not just kind of black one of those out and focus on the other, that they have to be together or they don't mesh well and your performance struggles in one or the other.
It's crazy how like bad coaches linger in your mind as a player. Right. And it just sticks with you. And I feel like bad coaches actually really mold how you teach. That's just my personal opinion, is that they mold how you teach those players. And then you take those really good coaches and you kind of try to model off of that. But majority of how your teaching philosophies are like, yeah, I really don't want to do what that guy did to me.
Right. And you pick that up and you learn from it, and it sucks then, but you don't want any of your players to be in those types of situations. So past struggles and past disagreements with former coaches really, really hit home when you're talking to your players, because you don't want them to ever have that feeling you ever went through.
What you said that in your job that you do full time, you're dealing with special needs, correct?
Yes.
So like, how does that play a factor? Because not many people have that background with special needs. And then I feel like that gives you a unique advantage point than most coaches. And maybe like some insights that you give could probably give some thoughts to coaches that are not in your situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for an educational company. I'm a director of education. So I run 4 private nonprofit schools in Western Pennsylvania. I help oversee them, help develop what they're doing with the students in the building. So, learning and seeing the struggles of students that aren't accepted into public schools, the public schools don't want them there. They outsource them for that reason. Seeing how their brains work and understanding what you can accomplish that day. There may be a day where you just gain ground upon ground upon ground, and they do so well and they exceed and excel further than they ever have before. But then the next day they come in and it's like it's not there, or they just don't have it that day. And that very to our players. There'd be a day they go 3 for 4 and 2 doubles and a triple, and they're just on it. They're stellar in the field. And the next day they come in and they couldn't hit water if they were falling out of a boat, and they're bobbling everything. And it's just how that brain works that we have to understand as coaches that can happen. And it's sometimes out of their control. It's just something's not going right, and helping them figure out what that is. Maybe it is that they are students at the end of the day as well as athletes, that they bombed a test that day and they just can't get that out of their head, and they come to practice and they struggle because they're just not at practice mentally. They're so worrying about how they're figuring out what they're going to do for their academic career because they just bombed a test or something like that. And it's really a huge buzzword in my field is trauma informed. And everybody has a different form of trauma. Whether it's so simple that we wouldn't look at it as trauma, is trauma to them. And our players come to us with that. And I try to take that approach where something that was not a struggle for me as a player could be an extreme struggle for one of my players now. So as simple as doing a backhanded flip may have been in my toolbox of skills is not there for a player, and they need to flip their hand. And sure, it takes more time, but now I know that I shouldn't ask that of them until we really, really work on it and they start to feel comfortable with that skill or toolbox tool. And that really kind of translates back and forth. And it really helps me connect with how my kids' brains are working and where they're at emotionally and physically and mentally, because that all starts to tie together. These kids are starting to try to make college decisions and where they want to play, what they want to do for the rest of their lives. That all starts to weigh on you. I mean, I can remember it very, very vividly of like, what do I want to do with my life? And I want to play baseball while I'm doing it. So these kids are going through that as well. And that can be a heavy burden. So meeting them and helping them where they're at, and maybe a day where they come in for a session, it might just be a completely talk through what they're thinking about what they want to do for their life after baseball. So what school fits them best? Let's not pick a program just because the coach wants you to be there and then not have your major that you want to major in the rest of your life, because you're setting yourself up for things that don't make sense. So talking them through that, because I found more not a parent wants their player to be happy. So if they're playing, they're happy in their mind and they're not worried about what happens next. They want them to play baseball. So helping them talk through that and being that voice of reason and calm for them is, I think, a huge piece.
It's a vicious circle where a parent just wants them to be happy and they're playing a game that's filled with failure.
Right.
It's hard for them to stay happy. I think you made a really good point that I hadn't really thought about, is like why some parents could be unhappy with the situation of their club, and it could be because like their kids playing baseball, then they thought like, oh, that's going to deliver them happiness, but then they come in the car and they go in the car and they're like, this is the worst day ever. I went 0 for 3 with three punchies and just absolute miserable thing. And I guess that goes back to your point of like maybe as coaches, we need to start teaching players how to compartmentalize certain things. And that was a big thing in my career that I learned very early on at high school, was that if I had an issue with a test or an issue with a girlfriend where we had like an argument, and like I totally just played horribly out on the field, and the coach would be like, well, why are you playing so bad? It's like I couldn't answer it, and then finally kind of figured it out like senior year. It's like, oh, probably because I had this part of my life was doing really poorly, and I just wasn't figuring out that part of my life.
Right. And I mean, it still happens as an adult. I mean, you could have a really bad day at work and you show up to practice and you're just not all there. And you have to really, really check yourself before you go on that field with those boys and those young men, because you're their lifeline maybe that day. So you carrying what you've done all day into practice could really be a detriment to what's going on the field. That's huge. I know that's a lot of, I mean, we all have personal lives outside of baseball, with work and with wives and children and in-laws and parents that you may be caring for and things like that. So checking that at the door, and it's not easy. That's something we tell all of my teaching staff. Like, you got to check yourself at the door before you deal with these kids, because if you're not meeting your needs, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to meet your kids' needs. And it's the same thing with our boys. If you're not ready to help meet them where they're at, it's going to be a struggle that day. And that's why I've really embraced not only coaching the 12U team this year, because it's a completely different aspect than coaching the 18U, because I'm going to do both, and I'm really excited for it because these kids are there and they just love baseball right now at 12U. They just absolutely are fully enveloped in the game. They just want to be a sponge and soak it all up. And it's going to be a really cool process of seeing them there and then seeing them in 5 years down the road at that 18U level and see them develop into who they are.
And my wife and I always have a saying before we help our kids, like, are your needs met? Are you okay? Like, have you done the things that you wanted to do? And she has to remind me, and I have to remind her, because at the end of the day, we want the best for our kids, but we can't help them if we can't help ourselves. So it's almost the same concept with coaching, as like, you can't help your players until you help yourself, whatever you have to clean off your table, whether that's a conversation with one of your kids or your parents, your wife, whatever, or spouse, like it's all encompassing. It's kind of crazy how this game kind of affects the rest of your life and kind of makes you accountable.
100%. Baseball is very much, I compare it to life, because life is set up just like baseball. You're going to fail more often than not. It's what you learn from that failure and how you grow from it is how much success you have later on. I mean, I interviewed 30 sometimes for a teaching job until I got one, and it has developed into being a director of 4 schools. So baseball, you may struggle with the curveball for weeks until it's a clutch time in a game, late in a game, and you drive a curveball the other way in the gap. And it's because of all the work you've put in and realizing that, hey, I've failed for a reason, to grow and get better at something.
Yeah, it teaches you how to adjust to things on the fly, for sure. 100%. And no matter if you're on the defensive side of the ball or the offensive side of the ball. I know that, Tim, this kind of puts you into that youth side of the game in Pittsburgh. What are you most excited about on the youth side versus like the high school side? And what are you going to miss about the high school side?
So I really think part of it is the excitement of the game. These kids have like a burning love just to play baseball and develop. And you see all these raw tools that these kids have that they just need work with and to develop them into what they can be. Working with families that are still really excited, new to it, and getting them into the game, loving the baseball, realizing that it's a culture and a family. I think that's definitely what I'm excited about. Missing the 18U, I think spending so much time with the youth, and I know Craig and Tim are doing a really good job of helping push kids and help them make college decisions. I'm still in some of that. I'm still helping with the connections that I have, but I think that process I'll definitely miss, helping those kids complete those dreams, and helping push kids towards different schools that you know that they're going to have that good fit for. The coach is a good fit for them. They're a good fit for the program. Still helping, but definitely missing the bigger aspect of that will be a miss. So it's kind of a trade-off because you're getting kids into the love of the game, but then towards that back end, they're not missing some of those ending goals and completing their dreams. So you still get to see it, but definitely, I think it's a fair trade-off, but definitely what I would say as what I'll miss.
What do you think what, I guess not what do you think, but what are your priorities with the 12-year-old group? And how does it compare to like the high school group that you had?
So I think priorities is teaching our culture and realizing that they're coming from Little League and Pony Ball and a lot of dad coach teams where they're that center of attention, especially if it was their dad, and teaching that we over me mentality and watching it click, like seeing that aha moment of where like, yeah, like I did a job for my team and my team benefited from it, rather than I went out there and hit a double and it's good for my stats. But no, I hit a double and drove in a run that benefited my team. Getting that switch for them, that yes, it's a very individual game, but in the end, it is a team game, and your individual performance just pays into the team bank is how I look at it. So each performance is a paycheck into the bank, and your team's bank at the end of the day, when you cash that out, is a W, and helping them win and work together. I think when you get to that 18U level, that 17, 18U level, they know that, but they're also working on getting them to college. So their next step is, yes, my team my individual performance helps my team, but it's also helping me get exposed to the next level, where that 12U group it's all team. We're not even looking at that next step yet. It's getting better to benefit my team. So they're getting that group to gel and become that family that we want, that Tiger family. And that's the really, really cool aspect of running that 12U program.
Yeah, it's weird how as you get older and you start getting into the recruiting circuit, it becomes very individualistic pretty quickly. And if coach doesn't solve that from the get-go, whether that's at 18U or 16U, that train can run away from you, and you can't stop it when it's getting away from you. Because I mean, everyone knows, like, when you have a first committed kid, like, that's probably the best thing that NCAA has ever done, which is they've moved it back to junior year, where they can start signing people and oral commitments almost completely gone, or it is gone. But like, once that first person signs or gets committed, it's like game over. It starts becoming, if you don't grab that quickly, it becomes very vicious, very fast, and you don't get that team aspect until you're in actual college again. So I think the big thing for 12U that it would get me excited was that it's purely team.
Right.
There's nothing else. It's all about the team. You rarely get that individual aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's definitely exciting. That's what I'm looking forward to. A good group of young kids coming in, and they really want to learn and work together. So that's really exciting.
What's your thoughts on winter training and how you train guys? Because I know you guys have a unique space at the clubhouse. But like, how do you view the cage with the team aspect to get the most out of your players? Especially like, because you know how it is, it gets cabin fever pretty quickly.
Right. I mean, I think keeping it competitive, so bringing small competition to every day. So like last week with 12U, it was their first taste of it, and I put a little of just teamwork. So, and I wanted certain things done in reps of 10, and I watched them all just kind of like crumble. And then we paused and we re-looked at it and said, why did we crumble? Why are you changing your swing to try to accomplish a drill you've been doing for the last 20 minutes? Why did you do something that I've watched you do 50 times already? I asked you to do 5 out of 10 times and everything changed. And you really, that part of it, they all sat there and digested that. And it's like, wow, we did that. And it's because that was their first revert of, yeah, this is all me. I need to do this. And then I realized that we all did that. We all struggled together. Now let's improve together. Went through it a second time and every single player completed the goal. And there's your first taste for them of competing, because maybe that drill converts into next spring where they're in a tight spot and they know that all they have to do is what we did now, and they'll be fine because they can fall back on the things that they've built up. And I think doing those small challenge drills and small challenges with amongst the team and seeing them fail and then talking them through it and seeing them then succeed afterwards is what keeps it from that lull from happening and keeping that cabin fever away, because they want to come back and do more, and you do it right at the end, and then you talk about it, and then they succeed and they get excited, and it's like, yeah, now I want to do it again next week, and they're ready to come back in, and you just do it in those small little doses, because you don't want to turn it on too early and burn them out. You just bring them small little doses of challenge and success and failure, because it's going to happen. Like, I mean, you fail 7 out of 10 times, you make it to the Hall of Fame hitting. I mean, it's as simple as that. So small things like that keep right now interesting and keep them wanting more.
It's being creative as a coach.
That too, and finding ways to engage your kids. What might work for me might not work for somebody else. You really have to know your group of kids and know what will turn them on and get them going and make them hungry and have that fierce competition, but also not take it too far to where they're burned out by the time the season comes.
Would you think like your North Star on the creativity would be how to increase pressure and how to increase the stakes?
Yeah. And I think that is the goal of all of it, is to slowly do that to when spring comes and you're out on the field in that first tournament, that my team is more prepared than the next team to match that level of play and have that intensity going then and not in January. But building those steps that they need to be there in January.
How do you solve for your defense in the winter?
So we're starting slow and we're hitting first, and then we're going to go to defense as well. And I think right now in the winter, it's the biggest piece is fundamentals. If we can get them fielding and moving in the right direction, the footwork's there, the glove work's there, we can set up and run double plays. So flips, speeds, picks, all of that can be accomplished. Do you put them on the field? That part's second nature by that time. And then you start putting in your defense, and their hands and feet are ready to where it doesn't matter if I say, all right, we're running a double cut here. And if I yell trailer out, they're making it happen with their feet and their hands and their brains. You take all of that out of the equation because you have that fundamental base down to where everything else is they're only worried about the task at hand. They know that they're going to catch it. They know their feet are going to be lined up, and they know they're going to be in the position to make that next throw or put the tag down or take that backhanded short hop, because we've worked on it and made it part of our routine to where that now starts our players are looking at it as that is a routine play. But when you put it out on the field, it looks like something fantastic. And that's what I want. And that makes them feel confident because they're making those plays then. And when they go back and think about it, it's like, yeah, I did, multiple practices inside working on extending that backhand on a ball in the hole at shortstop or over the bag at second base or down the line at third, setting my feet and throwing a seed across the field to make that play. And doing that and making that repetitive and normal only prepares them for when we get outside, and then we start adding the defensive scheme to everything.
So this is a fair analogy. Like if we were building a plane and we needed it to fly at the end of the year, you'd be working on like the right wing on one day, and then working on the left wing, and then working on the engine, and then working on the passenger seats, and then kind of piecing that all together in the last day.
Right. And then at the end, you're putting in all of the flying instruments in the cockpit and putting all the game plan together, and everything else is built around it and ready.
So then, like, how would you approach like this a 90-foot cage that's only 10 foot wide? Like, how would you do the defense in that scenario?
So I think that's just breaking it up into the stations that we have. And have
like multiple stations inside that cage.
Correct. So different things. We also we open that cage. Like we have the 3 cages that open into one big space. So we have that ability to do that as well. But if you're
like, let's just say then you have a cube of like, would be 20 to 30 feet wide.
Yeah.
Plus 90 feet or 60 feet down the lane.
Correct. So in that space, you're working small. You're working on individualized. So each drill is set up. All right, let's have a drill for third base work. Let's have a drill for the middle infielder here taking up space. Let's work on footwork for first baseman. And we can move that around the cage where then you're still having a throwing target. You're still having your eyes are still training around the base and what you're doing around the base, especially middle infield. We should be pros at touching the bag in the right spot, turning a double play, because we're going to do it so many times inside before we even get to the base. The bag doesn't change. The bag's the same size. The setup's the same. You're still coming into the bag, working on that flip, that feed, and working your foot to first base. And when you get on the field, then all it is you're changing your surroundings. It just looks different outside. Your first baseman's footwork should be ready because they're working on their drill, that they're sliding the bag correctly. They're setting up correctly. They're not setting up too early. So if there is a bad throw, they're ready to make that adjustment. Third base, if you're charging on a ball, you have room to make that play. Do you maybe get a perfect roll inside? Absolutely. But that also builds confidence. And we're playing on more and more turf fields that you're probably going to get that true roll a lot of times anyway. And if it's a choppy one, it's going to be that unique play that you either make or you don't. But if you're putting yourself in position to make that play and you're ready to make that play, it's going to happen more often than not, even if it's a unique roll or a short chopper that you're making that weird cuffed play at third base. So
how do you execute all this with just 2 coaches?
So I know we try to divide it corners and middle, and you work that way. You'll also then try to combine it together as much as possible so that you are watching and you can see things happening all at once. We also trust our kids to be individuals. And if we tell them, hey, you're working on this and we'll be around, they're working on that. And our kids do a very good job of that. If we give them slow roller drills and we have 2 guys at third base working it, they work it religiously until we say to rotate or until we come over and critique or change something or help them or change the drill. And maybe so they do that individually. Then we come and work with them backhanded short hops as a coach. And we move another spot, another position into individual drill that they're working together. And it's very simple to do that and still give individual attention to all the positions and players with just 2 coaches. It maybe works you, and you may be tired at the end of the day, but at an infielding practice, if the coach isn't tired, you didn't do enough in my mind. You should be moving constantly as building coach and doing as much as possible, because the infield never stops. Every pitch, somebody's moving, and the coach should be mimicking that and showing that, because if they're not showing it, then your players are going to get lazy. So you should.
I'm laughing because I totally agree. And the days that I would do defensive days, whether that was our Tigers training here in St. Louis, or if I had an individual team, reason private lessons, the hardest days were when I had mostly defensive days, just because like you have to be totally engulfed with defense, because it's just like you said, like you have to keep your feet moving. If you don't keep your feet moving, the ground ball is going to eat you up. And it's the same thing with like teaching it, is that if you don't keep moving and keep talking and keep getting those guys involved, defense can run away from you pretty quickly, because it can get kind of boring if you don't teach it the right way.
Right, 100%. So you always know when you do infield and defensive work, because that's the day that you feel tired or you actually break a sweat as a coach. And if you're inside,
go ahead.
If you're,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you're inside doing defensive work and you don't break a sweat, you did something wrong as a coach, in my mind.
It's probably because like offenses, there's so much variability because you don't know what type of pitch you're going to get. So the incentive structure for a kid is a little bit, it kind of hits that dopamine a little bit more.
Right.
And they like seeing that variability, where if you're doing defense and you roll a ground ball in a cage, it's the same thing over and over again. It's monotonous, but like that's where really good defenders, they can get over that monotonous action of fielding a ground ball or anything like that.
Right. And I
mean, that's why I didn't like basketball practice when I was in high school, because it was all monotonous dribbling drills, and that's when I started like hating basketball. Right. So, offensive wise, from the winner, what mistakes do you see a lot of teams make in the cages? I mean, you've been around so many different facilities. Like, what do you think a lot of coaches make mistakes on with their offensive approach in the winter?
I think going big too fast. So trying to increase that swing speed and power right out of the gate, because I think if you skip over the tee work, I mean, college baseball, we did tee work at least 3 days a week. Because that's where you find and refine and fine tune your swing. So everything else comes later. You don't change your swing to create bat speed and power. It's getting good at what you're doing and getting stronger and quicker. So if you skip over all of that basic tee work and front work and top hand, bottom hand, all that good stuff that creates a good swing, keeps you in the zone longer, keeps your head on the ball longer, gives you the ability to be comfortable driving to the opposite field. If you skip that stuff and just go straight for the big time, which I see a lot of, everybody wants to see StatCast numbers. They want to see that high exit velocity, the deep power. If you don't do the basic stuff, the fundamental stuff first, that stuff, you're creating holes in your swing. And I like how we have it set up. I like that we start slow and we do all the drills and we teach them, because when they feel that slump coming on or they get in that slump later, it's, hey, I know this drill will help me with this, and I go back to it. And they know they can do it on the side before you even say, hey, maybe it's time to go back to that bottom hand drill because we're not staying in the zone long enough and driving the opposite field right now. 9 times out of 10, yeah, coach, I actually worked on that yesterday before I came into practice today, because they know it. But if you don't work on that stuff and you get later into the winter and now we're struggling with something, one, our older guys are then going into high school ball and that we're coming out of high school ball and coming into summer ball in a slump with low confidence, and they're not remembering what you worked on, it's hard to fix that on the fly, especially when you're at a tournament every weekend and you're playing a lot. It's really hard to say, hey, we got to set up and just work on this. So if you work on that stuff now and slowly tune it up, and then start working for bat speed and power and things like that towards the end, they know that they have the fundamentals to do those things and go back to them.
Yeah, the base, like your foundation, is so important.
Right.
Upper, like not like mechanical base or foundation, but more of just what is the thing that gets you on track.
Right.
And I remember I was training in high school, and it was just it was a weird day that I went into the facility. That I was off school, and majority of schools weren't. And I went in, and there was a pro guy working out, and he was noticing that I was hitting off the tee, and he came over and he said, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" And I was like, "I'm hitting off the tee." And he's like, "Are you sure you're hitting off the tee?" And I go, I'm looking at him like, "Yeah, I'm hitting off the tee." Like, "What do you think? There's a ball on the tee and I'm hitting it." He's like, "No, but are you hitting the ball off the tee?" And I kept on thinking, like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And he's like, "You have no approach. Your approach, you're just putting middle and going ham on it. And you've been sitting here as long as I am, and you should have been done like 10 minutes ago." He's like, and he came into the cage and he's like, "I'm going to save you some time so you're not wasting your time in this cage." And he literally sat me down and he goes, "You're going to set the tee here, you're going to set the tee here, and you set the tee there. And you're going to do two hands, then you're going to do one hand top, and then you're going to do one hand bottom." And then literally that was my approach in high school, which was every time I got in the cage, that was my tee work for the day. And it got me to about 30 to 45 minutes of just working on location. And it actually helped me way better on pitch recognition than anything else, which is weird to think about because the ball's not moving, but it helped me understand the plate and the board that was given to me as the pitcher's throwing the ball.
Right. And I think that just builds your confidence and being comfortable at the plate. I remember in college, we hit in an old gym, and there was a cinder block wall out in front of you, and one square in the one wall where I looked to go opposite field. If I didn't hit that square, I knew something was wrong, because when I was on, it was that square every single time, made the same ricochet to the same spot of the gym. And you knew just from doing something that simple that something was off somewhere. So just that kind of recognition and repetitiveness gets you to the point to where you were out in the field. If I did that 10 times in a row and then went down to the field for a game, I knew I was going to have a good day because I knew my swing was on and I was where I needed to be mentally, physically. And I was zoned in. And more often than not, I had a good game at the plate after that happened. There were those weird ones where the pitcher was just better than you that day. But if I did that and went down to the field, I was in good shape. I knew my confidence level was in good shape.
Do you think 12-year-old players can handle those types of professional approaches to the cage, or do you think that they're still in let's have fun mode, which is fine? I'm just intrigued by what you would answer on this.
I think 100% yes. I think that is the perfect time, because they are a sponge, to start getting them into an approach routine. You start it now, and then you just build on to it forever and ever and ever and ever. Baseball's I feel like you learn forever in baseball. But I don't think it's too early to start that, because if they have a good routine, they know they can at least go back to that when they're not with you. We actually already started on just intro routine, what we do to warm up for hitting, then what we do in the cage before a game, and then what we're going to work on. So teaching them that routine, teaching them to feel their swing, whether they fully understand that their hands are here when they do this, or their hands are here when they do that, or maybe they don't feel themselves flying open, but starting that routine of, hey, You were open, and that's why the ball went here. Getting them to hear it and starting that terminology now at 12 is only going to benefit them as they start to move forward. Because when they hear it later and they start to, maybe they're just a little late developing and they start to understand it in a year or two, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that. And boom, this is exactly what I need to do for it. I don't think it's ever too early to start those types of routine.
Yeah, exposure to different ideas is probably the best route overall. I was thinking back to when I was playing, and this thing that kind of shot me in a direction of playing college professional baseball was the facility that I trained out of. There were so many different ex-pro guys, and I didn't realize at the time, but they were trying to teach those different routines in fun and dynamic ways.
Right.
They're just trying to be like little kids, like, hey, this is what worked for us, and this is how we did it, and they would do it in fun ways.
Right. So, and that's the thing. You can make any routine fun. You can make it fun, which engages them. But as long as you're using the terminology you want them to learn and develop, you can still do that, and they're still learning it, and they're grasping it, and they're still having fun while doing it. Playing baseball should always be fun in my mind. No matter how hard it gets, if you're not enjoying it, you're making yourself miserable. So I want them to enjoy it, but I also want them to start grasping what they need to know to get better.
From a season standpoint and coaching on the field, what demeanor of coach would you describe yourself as?
I would say lead by example. I'm not one that gets overworked up. I'm not one that's going to scream and yell to try to get a point home. I'm going to make my point as respectful and calmly as possible, whether it's with a player, with an umpire, with another coach, and I'm going to step and go my way. And I've made my point. It's not going to change something. It's not going to create this new invention within the game. And then I'm going to refocus on what happens next. Because with baseball, if you dwell on what has happened in the past, it only affects what's going to happen in the future. So we control our controllables and move on. I'm not a big rah guy. I want my kids to know that I'm proud of them and that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But once I acknowledge it, I'm moving on because the next guy's up. The next person's pitching. The next play needs to be made in the field. You can't dwell on a moment, good or bad. You have to move on to the next moment of the game.
Do you think you get better results by being more quiet and more observant than someone who's more loud and, I would say, put themselves out there?
I think I do. I enjoy that moment. Like, I love when a pitcher finishes his day and you give them time to calm down, and whether it was good or bad, and sitting there and saying, hey, what do you feel? What do you feel went well? What do you feel didn't go well? What do you think we can work on for next time that we're out there? I'd rather them tell me than me get loud and tell them, hey, you did this or you did that, or we need to change this. I want them to start thinking and digesting what has happened, and getting loud and being an emotional coach. Not that I don't have emotion, but an emotional coach on the field. I think that can kind of hinder that. I want them to be able to come and approach me and say, hey, coach, I want to work on this. Or when you ask them, hey, what do you think went well today? What do you think we need to work on? I want them to know that I want to talk about that stuff and help them get to it. So I think I get better results being an observant coach and more of a focus on the moment and then work on the other stuff later. Because I've always felt that if you try to make too many adjustments in games, you start making kids think too much, and let them develop it or maybe think on their own and then work on it after the game during practice that week to get better for the next week. You put too much pressure.
Probably gives them more confidence.
Yeah.
More, and it makes them feel like they have freedom.
Yes. And it also makes them, I feel like it gives them a say in what they're doing. Starts to make them grow maturity level, thinking about it in a way that it's not somebody just jamming it down their throat or yelling at them about. They're actually getting a say in how they felt they did and what they think they need to work on.
Yeah, that freedom to be themselves and being able to make mistakes is a pretty natural thing for human nature. And if you lean into that, I feel like that's going to pay dividends to whether that's wins or progress in that player, developing more skills or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%. I think of like Hunter Pence. He was one of the most awkward baseball players I've ever seen, but he was successful doing it. If somebody jumped down him and tried to make him a robot or cookie cutter baseball player, would he have ever gotten that good?
There's probably countless of guys like that. Yeah.
So I think
Craig Counsell is another one of those guys. Yeah.
I think that speaks volumes and letting them have ownership in their training and their development.
I mean, it's all results driven anyways when it comes to like, did you get the job done or did you not? I mean, I played with an All-American he was 170 pounds and 6'1", and he absolutely hit the tail out of the baseball, and no one really talked to him about his weight gain. They're just like, just keep doing you. I mean,
Right.
We know who you are. You're a guy that's going to hit singles and get on base, and you're going to probably lead the country in hitting. We don't want you to be that home run hitter.
Right.
Bill, this has been an awesome conversation, man. I really appreciate it. Got touched on a lot of cool things, and I think there's a lot of value that was given.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. So
definitely. No, I'm excited to follow you guys in Pittsburgh. I know Tim gives me updates constantly. But is there any updates you want to give for all the Tiger people on Pittsburgh and what you guys are doing up there?
I definitely think we're growing. I think we're finding a good staff. We're putting together some good quality staffing patterns, and with quality players, I think you're going to start to see some good quality come out of Pittsburgh and get into college. I know we just had 3 or 4 commit just recently. Awesome. We're getting our guys to that next level, and I'm really excited to see what they do this summer. And then at the next level, I think we're just going to keep growing. I think we're going to keep finding good talent and develop that talent. And I'm really excited some of the young coaches that we're bringing in as well, that are bringing in their taste of baseball and their expertise of what they had in college. So I'm really excited about what's coming out of our area right now.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Bill. Thanks.
Absolutely. Have a good one.